introduction. Oops, what about it?
Hi, everybody. Welcome to our February 3rd Thursday, the BC Wine Grape Council monthly presentation. Today we have Dr. Benmin Chang here to report on the survey that you all, hopefully you all filled out, you all received it filled out. Benmin Chang is the research scientist of viticulture and plant physiology in Summerland at the Summerland Research and Development Center. He joined Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada in Summerland in March 2022. Previously, he received his PhD degree and worked as postdoctoral research associate at the Irrigated Agriculture Research and Extension Center in Prosser, Washington. Benmin had diverse experiences working in viticulture, starting with table grape research in subtropical Taiwan in 2008. He studied grape berry splitting and heat stress management in Washington State. His current research focus on the grape is on the grapevine stress management. Specifically, he's interested in managing cold, heat, and drought stress of wine grapes in the Okanagan Valley. And I think it was really kind of us to have like our worst cold event ever, just as he was coming on, to give him something to work on. So you're welcome for that, Benmin. And
All right.
welcome.
Thank you, Cassie, for introduction. Yeah, I really hope I didn't bring those heat dome and cold snap to here. Okay, let's change the slides to today's presentation. All right. Could you see the slides?
Yep, all good.
Okay, all good. Okay, so let's start it. Let me get the pointer out. Okay. All right, so today I'm going to talk about the kind of like scratch the surface of that survey we did. Probably it lasted for a while, right? Like I think from June, and you can actually answer that survey until I think we closed it around like a December actually. Okay, so today I'm going to talk about what we learned from this survey. Okay, so first thing first, we have to talk about why we are doing this. That's because there was a cold snap events in 2024. There was actually two cold snap events, one in January, the other is later, the same year in March. So basically, these are two events has the same cause, which is from the southern stratospheric warming. So usually in an Arctic area, if the polar vortex is stable, it will look like this, and they will hold the vortex will actually holding the cold air, Arctic cold air, really well in these kind of like cylinder shape. But if there is a sudden warming event happen, so this is a graph shows what will happen. So once the vortex become weaker, actually there's a hot air will moving into the Arctic air and push those really cold cold air in the Arctic area to we call like a mid latitude region. So that's basically like North America, US, and Canada included. Okay, so these kind of events are kind of special because usually they last very long. Maybe you remember the 2024 January event. It lasted for a couple of weeks, right? And also, of course, the air from Arctic region, they're extremely cold. So this is basically becomes the events we didn't have for 30 years. And basically, we didn't really have much experience how to handle this kind of cold event in British Columbia here. Okay, so because we did a survey and we actually received quite a few answer actually from the Vancouver Island and also Fraser Valley region, and also Lilut, right? It's a region. So usually our work usually focus on just within the Okanagan Valley, but this time we got a much more extended response from many growers. So this time I'm going to also include the temperature analysis for this region as well. So this is basically the 2024 January air temperature change across literally like all the grape growing regions. So you can definitely tell this is the terrible temperature drop here. Like for example, even in Vancouver Island, just a few days ago before the events, the temperature was 8 degrees Celsius, and suddenly they experienced the temperature drop down to say like a minus 13. And everyone in the valley, in the Okanagan Valley here, we remember there was quite a mild winter, right? Until then, and we also saw the dramatic temperature drop in some places, like a Kelowna or Seminar. Temperature went to almost minus 30 degrees Celsius. And I remember that the most of grape we're growing in the valley here, they are European wine grapes. Usually they can turn down to minus 25 degrees Celsius, which is like this line here. But you can tell many places actually went to even lower than that. So that's basically the reason why we have such a huge cold damage last year. Okay, so here is kind of like a little bit dissection. So this graph shows you the temperature change across the three places. Basically, these three places are at the pretty much the same latitude, but they cross from west to east. So you can see the temperature distribution here, like across this geographic distribution. You will see like a little region is actually pretty relatively mild there. Their temperature went to minus 23, but in Seminar region, actually the temperature went to, that's where we are almost approaching to minus 30. And across these different longitude, the temperature differences, the lowest temperature differences was about 7 degrees Celsius. So the next one, we're going to analyze the north and south distribution. So from Seminar, which is the coldest place, and also quite similar to Kelowna, and down to also use, so basically across the whole valley here, and we are seeing the temperature differences was 8 degrees Celsius. And here is a very fine dissection. So with the BC Ministry of Agriculture and right, Food and Agriculture Ministry. Right now, they have a really good weather station network across the whole valley here. And these 4 weather stations are all located around Summerland. And this graph actually shows you the elevations differences. For example, like here, we probably have a maximum 150 meters elevation change, and that could result in 4 degrees Celsius differences in the valley here. So basically, the previous 3 slides are just basically talking about what's the geographical distribution and how that influences the temperature differences or variations. Okay, so this is basically I can kind of really quickly conclude what's the distribution of the temperature change. So from the west to east, it become colder, and from the south to north, it also become colder. And if you are in a higher elevation, and it is cooler as well. So this graph only shows you the location of the cities, and also the red dots actually shows the where are those survey answer come from. Okay, so right now I'm going to talk about a little bit, I would say a little bit nerdy thing. So basically, what caused or what's the probability like the code damage happen is literally just like a random number generator thing. But the one factor could change that probability is the temperature. Okay, so this year actually I did an experiment and on the lower grapes when the LT50. So this is the cold hardness measurement we are always doing for the previous like 15 years from Pep Bowen and Carl. They already started, right? And we are just keep doing it. And this year we are kind of lucky. There is a period of time and the temperature change was really stable. So it also stabilized the LT50 value around this day. So that give me the chance I can actually throw the samples in our one freezer, the programmable freezer. There's only one, so we have to throw them every single experiment treatment. We throw them there for 24 hours, and I call this as a like a prolonged exposure experiment. So usually the regular assessment, we throw them in the freezer and the temperature drop is really quick and doesn't stay at a constant temperature. But this time, this experiment, I throw the buds into the chamber and just let them sit at the constant temperature, for example, from minus 23, 22 Celsius for one full day, and the other treatment also let them stay for one full day. And we register by the end of that 24 hours how many buds survive, how many buds are dead. So this is basically the overall curve we got. So you can definitely notice, even though the regular LT50, when it is about minus 20 degrees Celsius, with this method, when the survival rate is about 50%, the the critical temperature actually rise to minus 18 degrees Celsius or even higher. So that actually means if we extended the exposure time, we also increase the probability of the cold damage. Okay, so that's
Hey,
basically. Mhm.
Benjamin, can I just so on your screen where your Zoom's got this message, Zoom is sharing your screen, and there you can stop sharing or hide. Can you see it on there?
Oh, this one. Hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, cool,
Ah, I saw you
awesome.
couldn't see it.
Thanks.
It's also bothered me a lot. Thank you for mentioning that. Okay, let's go back to the talk. Yeah. Okay, so we were talking about the probability. Yeah. So basically that means when the cold damage happen, it's just like a throwing dice, right? And if you throw, for example, like if you throw 1 point, that means the death. And yeah, so the only say if you have a just a cubic dice have a 6 faces, right? But if you have a say you have like a 10 faces dice, that basically is analog to like higher exposure temperature. So the chance you throw to the 1 point decrease, right? So that's a kind of how I use the analog of a dice to describe the probability. And the other thing is, so if we have a more buzz, that also means we have a more chance to throw the dice. So more buzz probably means a more survived buzz during some certain type of hazard condition. Okay. Next. Oops. Okay, so to me later on I learned that okay, survival is victory. So once we have a one bus survive, our code is good. Like for say we actually grow, we establish the vineyard from just like this, right? A grafted, for example, one bus grafted vine. We start everything from here, and if our vine actually somehow still have a one bus survive, maybe they could still recover to to the full production. But of course, you might have a variation inside the vineyard, and that's actually the main reason why you decide to replant it. Okay. So over here, how many latent buds are in the vine is actually the key for the survival. So where are those latent buds? Where are they coming from is actually, for example, if you have a sucker growing at the bottom of the vine, when you remove it, you couldn't really just remove everything, right? Usually the basal buds will be there, and also the basal bud also exists in any shoots you have. So say you have fruiting shoots or fruiting came, they definitely have those basal buds, and also when bud break, usually only the primary buds will bud break, and they will leave the secondary and tertiary buds um, still in dormancy, and these buds becomes the latent buds for next year or even longer. Like right now, we don't really know how long this latent bud could survive, and looks like they are pretty resilient, even though um, you didn't see much movement over the trunk, right? But if you have a cold damage like the past years, we actually seen the latent buds. They grow back and become a new shoots for after this cold event. Okay, so I got a request from the wine grape council, and basically want to know what's the effects, what factor affects the survivability of a grapevine. So we got this request, and we want to see if we can use the survey type of approach to identify what's the factors influence the cold hardness. Like we know the variety is a very important factor, right? But also because of the previous mechanism I mentioned, and also trying to figure out if the bud numbers does matter. So we have a really simple design. I don't try to put too many questions in that survey, otherwise you'll get bored quickly. And I think many of us are actually still trying to answer as many questions as possible, but in the end, it's pretty boring activity. Yeah. Okay. So the design is actually have a three major sector. I want to know what's the plant material, and what are the external factor the user vine experience, and what's the response of those vines or you growers like respond to these cold events. Okay. So this is kind of how I composed this survey. And also over here, Jose, my colleague Jose, he helped me to design the question for the disease sector. Okay, so after we opened the survey for a while and closed it in December. Finally, go to the data cleaning stage. So my technician, Manuel, she's the one who deal with all those all these requests, because for example, something I actually didn't ask you guys, but I can indirectly got those messages. For example, the elevation of the vineyard site. Once I got a coordinates or the address of the location, I could guess kind of the elevation of this vineyard site. So she was the one who like one one rows by rows, and to try to figure out what's exactly the elevations, and further consolidate everything together. Yeah, so basically the survey actually included the I think the provincial replant programs question as well. So that portion I basically just ignore it, because that's not my focus, and I also feel like I actually shouldn't know your answer from that question. So basically, the first thing I did was I excluded that section from my survey parts, and to clean the data. Basically, just need to meet the minimum requirements. So I know a lot of blank were not filled in many answers, but at least I take those answers with have with like a full varietal description and all the bud break location information. So these are kind of like a minimum requirement for my analysis. And most of the smaller growers, you guys fill the survey with SurveyMonkey, and we also distribute one Excel format for bigger or medium growers. So that for them, that's easier to fill. For example, Altera, they filled probably almost like a 100 or more than 100 data points there, so which is really helpful for this survey study. So basically, later on, we have to, in a background, we consolidate these two different format data together. Okay, and I personally trying to avoid some bias when I analyze the data. So basically, every varietal or even treatment, they become the code. And later on, I use I'll this kind of explain this score later. So this is a main index to indicate the survivability or the survival rate for under this survey. Okay, so now we can quickly go through some more like a descriptive result. So in this survey, we actually got a vineyard block growing like mostly Malort, Cabernet Sauvignon, and Pinot Gris and Pinot Noir, which is a slightly different what we actually have in the valley. Yeah, this is just kind of like a note. This is the based on 2022's acreage survey. The rank 1 is still Malort, but the rank 2, 3, 4 is actually Pinot Noir, Pinot Gris, and the Chardonnay. This is basically just means some Chardonnay grower, they didn't really answer or respond to the to the survey as expected. So same thing here. This is a rootstock. We got most of the answers. Actually, this block has SO4 and Riparia, and also 10114 and 3309C. And this is also different from what the real distribution or the real variation. So in the valley here, the most popular rootstock is actually 3309, and that's the rank showing here. Okay. And also all the survey data mostly are from the valley, of course, since we have most of the grapevine growing in the valley here. So this is fairly similar to the survey, and the real situation is quite similar. So Oliver also used most of the answer from these two regions, and from the third and the fourth is slightly different. So in reality, there are actually more acreage in Kelowna area, but we didn't actually get a paramount of a response from this region. So as I mentioned before, this is the geographic distribution of where are these answers come from. So as you can tell, most of the answers come from the valley here. And so this time is pretty cool because we are also receiving answers from the island and also Fraser Valley, Lilu, and also up to Seminar. We got one set of answers. Okay, so as I mentioned before, Altera they not only fill the Excel form, but also they offer slightly more different informations. So they're mostly the operation in the south, right? So some of the places that actually the vine do carry some fruits, but of course this is not the normal year. The how many cluster per vine number is still pretty low in most of the case. But over here, this two graph shows kind of like a correspondent to those temperature distribution I mentioned before. The higher, the colder, the northern side, the colder side. So basically, we're seeing the damage rate to the crop or to the yield you can see if you have a lower elevation, the chance you might still carry fruit is slightly higher, but still you can have some situation because maybe different varieties really susceptible to cold. They still suffer in those lower elevation, and a similar trends you can see in here, right? So the southern side you can see a little bit higher yield over here. It's pretty straightforward. And in that survey, I also included one question about. I asked, did you see the bleeding when the spring coming? So bleeding is actually a very important indicator about the xylem's health. If you are seeing bleeding, that means the xylem is probably fine and they are working. So the xylem damage is actually what we worry about. This is the major cause of the whole vine death. Once they couldn't get sufficient water, the vine will just die, right? So few answers I collected, they're actually still reporting no signs of a bleeding, but many of them still reporting bulb break still happen, and this is probably just maybe we missed the observation windows. Yeah. So in our own vineyard, we did another destructive measurement. So we feed the vines when there are leaves. We feed the vine with tracers. So these are purple color. They shows where are those functional xylens are. So you can see here, most of the xylem are actually still working, but it's a pretty alarming. Say in at the center here, this is actually trunk disease symptom. So when you have a trunk disease like this, like a browning sector, those are xylem actually no longer working. But the good news is the cold actually didn't really damage much of xylem here. And I also asked about the pruning method, right? So pruning method, eventually I decided not to use them for analysis because when I think I should explain what are these pruning methods better, because these actually listed by the severity of the pruning. So the replanting is the most severe way. You kind of not really pruning, but you replace the whole vine. But here is a trunk renewal. This is probably the most extreme way. Basically, you make the cut here and then remove the rest of the canopy here. And the no prune is no prune. And so in a survey, I noticed sometimes the people actually choose minimum prune after they first time have a severe prune over here. So I think people might misunderstood the minimum pruning's definition here. So minimum pruning for the VSP canopy is you can see it as the pre-prune. Maybe you use the machine to do the pre-prune. That probably could call minimum prune here. So eventually I decided it's a little bit too confused to use, even though I could actually use your basically management decision to evaluate what's the damage you are seeing in a vineyard. But eventually I think, okay, that's fine. We have another index we can use, which is the bulb break here. So the bulb break overall has carries many useful information, right? That's the most important thing is they indicate the latent buds are survive, or even the primary buds from last year they survive. Okay, so this is the overall bulb break rate of a different structure, and you may notice the rootstock bulb break is actually extremely high. So this value basically tells us uh, the overall scion damage is very severe in most of the case. Otherwise, in a normal year, we wouldn't see rootstock bulb break as high as 80%, right? Okay, and of course, you can definitely tell the upper side, like the can and the spur, usually they have a fairly low bud break rate here. Yeah, so basically you can tell there is kind of like a spatial distribution. The lower side you have a higher bud break rate, and the top side you have a lower bud break. So overall, we serve eventually the valid data sets we got was 317 data sets, and actually only 11 blocks. So 11 data sets actually report there's no cyan bud break, which means the vineyard might be dead. So which is account for 3.5% of the vineyard overall. This vineyard like showing okay, probably you have to go for replanting. Okay, now I can finally start to explain what's the recovery score. So as I mentioned, I measure kind of capture the where are those bud break location, right? So with these, we can actually uh, have a kind of assumption, say, okay, if we got a more bud break sites in the future, that's easier to retrain, to recover this vineyard. So basically, that's tell us the opportunity, how many buds or how many shoots you can use to rebuild your vineyard. Okay, so every bud break on the cyan, so above the union, and each size, if you say, okay, you reported, okay, there was a bud break, then the score will +1. But if that's a rootstock bud break, and I'll just -1 point because we don't really want to have a rootstock growing, right? And in the same time, if you have a rootstock growing, that also means the competition for water between the cyan and the rootstock. So basically, that's the reason I give them a -1 point for this recovery score. So the first factor I want to evaluate was like are the crop load or the yield in the past few years. Does that matter? Does that affect the survival rate of the vines? And here is actually among different varieties, we don't really see a clear trend. It's probably one thing is we seldom got a really high, say like a high yield for some variety, right? And most of us actually doing fruit thinning really well. So I feel the overall conclusion is actually we don't have a sufficient like a high crop load data to say okay, the yields actually affects the survival rate or the recovery score of the vine. But for example, like the Cabernet Sauvignon, right? The overall yield is quite low. Only these white variety and Malort, some 2 points is probably over the higher side, but only four, for example, 4 point here. We don't really have any points here. If we could have another maybe 10 points in this region, we probably have a better idea, right? We might actually missing some point here. Why not just we don't have a sufficient data to support the higher yield actually decrease the recovery score. And also similar finding, similar discovery here is the age here. In the valley, most of vine are actually not very old. And say here you got a 40 years or above 40 years old vines points actually is minimal compared to rest of the parts here. So here is also maybe too young to really judge, say, okay, if the age will actually affects survival rate or the recovery score. And the other thing I want to evaluate was if how you manage your suckers will be different, because remember that I said if we the bus number, the latent bus number is the key, right? So if we are using chemical herbicide to do the desuckering things, the hypothesis was that if you are using chemical, you might actually killed those latent buds more than the mass if you move it with a mechanical way, either using just a pruner or even some tractor attachment to remove the suckers. So based on that, I kind of like trying to evaluate it, does the herbicide usage will influence the latent bus number. But unfortunately, because the what's that, the new growth above the head of these vine, actually they will suppress the growth of the buds from the suckers or below, right? So I have to filter out all the samples, all the data with upper parts growing. So in the end, I only got a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 points. So this is also not as really enough number to evaluate does this herbicide usage will actually affect the recovery score. So overall, this approach wasn't really successful, unfortunately, and we definitely need more points to have a solid conclusion. Okay. And the other thing is with Jose's question, I should be able to analyze how virus or even trunk disease will affect the recovery score. Okay, so the same sample size problem happened with the trunk disease. Most of us probably don't really want to cut the trunk to evaluate it. What's the percentage of damage in the vineyard, right? But with the, for example, like red blotch or these fan leaf virus, and then what else? Leaf roll virus. We can actually visually see the approximate virus infected ratio, right? So I plot these infection ratio. This is just your observation. We didn't really run the for example, the RNA or DNA test about the virus infection. We're just visually seeing the red leaf and saying they might be suspected infected vines. With that value, I use it to against the recovery score. Actually, have a very interesting relation here. It is, even though the R square value is very little, but it is a significant relation here. So here is basically telling us the higher infection rate, actually there are more buds pushing from the trunk and head or from the base of the vine, the unit, for example. So this is kind of like a weird, right? But I'm thinking about maybe because of these vines are always under virus stress, so their the main growth usually is not so good. So they're always trying to push more suckers or lateral shoots. Probably these kind of indirectly increase the number of the latent buds. So this is a hypothesis and requires a further evaluation. But like a indirect effects basically might actually slightly increase the survivability of the vine after the cold damage. But remember that the other effects is the red blotch. It was found that directly decrease the cold hardness, not really decrease. Sorry, like make the vine more susceptible to the cold. So remember that this not saying once you got virus you love it, you should keep it. No, it's in certain cases the red blotch is detrimental to your vine. Yeah, you have to remember that. Okay, so I think most of us are really interested in how the variety influence the survivability, right? So I did like plot everything here, but also you can basically see these as a rank, like what's the probability they survive here. Okay, so this is a rank, but you can notice some of the sample size are just too small. So maybe from 2 blocks from the whole province, that's not really enough to judge are they really be the perfect vines. So I will actually decrease the size of the table a little bit and only take the block numbers larger than 10. So if the sample size above 10 blocks, I will take it. So basically, I plotted these ranking system, this rank here for variety. So Riesling, they deal with the cold pretty well, and they usually have multiple sites, and there will bud break happen. So that also means you have a multiple choice when you're doing retrunk. And as most of people uh, expected, the Syrah was doing the worst among these popular varieties. Okay, so over here is basically means like less than 2 sites in a trunk, they will regenerate some new growth. I think mostly actually come from the basal buds. So the other thing I asked in that survey is about snow coverage. So to ask that question, I can actually pick out some kind of like those protected basal buds. So this actually doesn't necessarily shows the true color of that variety. We have to evaluate them in a more fair or non-biased manner, right? So I can actually use your answer about the snow coverage to take out those data sets and I'll have a new ranking of the variety here. But I wasn't expecting the rank is like fairly similar. You're still seeing the Riesling worked really well here. And only the rank change is around this region in the middle sector. There's some up and down, but that basically means all these median section, their performance is quite similar. Mm-hmm. And the other thing I heard people ask a lot is about does the rootstock matter? But over here, I using a similar approach, like a kind of like a separate different rootstock and see what their scrolls are. But also over here, you can see the sample number is fairly low. So you can take this grain of salt and yeah. So basically, my conclusion here is it's not really clear which rootstock actually works better among these popular rootstocks. Okay. So for example, among like a Pinot Gris and Pinot Noir, the rank is actually opposite. Yeah. So that's a conclusion for the rootstock. Like among these popular variety, we don't really know who works better, but maybe in the future there are better rootstock actually works, and we can probably see the differences from there. So overall, I think that's all. Oh, okay, good time. We probably have 15 minutes for a question. So the take home message here is the rootstock. The bar breaks were prominent. So it's really obvious. And also that indicates the science damage are really bad. And among those, just I mentioned, the rootstock variety probably doesn't really matter right now. And the other thing I heard, and I remember in the provincial replanting program, it has a question about which variety is the one you don't want to you don't want to pay in the like use your tax money for the subsidy, right? And most of people answer that's a Syrah, but the data actually shows here they might be the worst among these popular variety, but they still kind of survive. You still have at least 1 point sites, 1.7, almost 2 sites you can use to retrain your vineyard. So I will say, well, they kind of barely survived. Yeah, that's the one of the interesting finding here. And the also I mentioned before, the vine age right now is probably too young. In our industry, we are a super young industry, so the vines are probably too young to judge do they have a really affects the survivability, and also crop load has the similar issue. Like we usually doing the fruit thinning really good, so we couldn't really judge from the current survey. Okay, so basically I finished the really quick glance at the survey result, and here I just mentioned about what we're doing so far. So we're actually doing really well this year. This is the wind speed, or basically shows how stable the polar vortex is. Right now we are at least point, and the US side, they haven't published the new the forecast, but I guess it wouldn't really change much, and which means we still being protected by the strong polar vortex really well, and we are really close to the spring right now. So just a few more months, and we are free to go. Okay, the last pages, I would like to thank all the growers and the winemakers participate in this survey, and a special thanks to Jose to design those disease question, and thanks to my 3 technicians, and also, of course, the Wine Grade Council and the Wine Grower Associations. And also, I have to thank the British Columbia Ministry of Agriculture and the Food, especially they recently share this link with me. So there's a where you can actually access those weather data. Super helpful. And also Jason London at Cornell University, they developed this cold hardness model, and that looks pretty reliable so far. And this is also like a kind of ongoing things. I would like to evaluate how well their model works in the valley. Okay, so I think we could still have some time for questions.
Thanks, Benmin. That was super interesting. Have you been able to, like, is this now going onto the GIS that Pat started? Like,
Yeah, so actually this morning I was thinking, hey, the other concern about those rusa is actually how well they are dealing with the soil type. So with that, we can actually overlay the provincial's soil map and see, basically set up another filter to refine the data we got. But right now, that this approach probably will still suffer from a lack of samples. Yeah.
yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, because we had that in 2019, right? We had, sure you've heard about this. We had a very warm January and followed by a very cold February, and the vineyards on heavier soils really fared poorly. I think it was, and that was because of the fact that the warm January allowed the moisture to come out of the soil, and so the roots weren't protected. Have you heard that whole story?
Yeah. So
I
think Pat told me once. So I think the hypothesis was when the air are warmer, but the soil is actually colder, and the colder air, the colder soil actually couldn't support the water supply.
Right.
Because the aquaporin are probably taking a break or something. So they actually couldn't absorb water as fast as possible to match the demands. Like when you already have a probably leaf going and the air are dry because it's warmer. So actually drying those buds fairly quick. Yeah, I heard that hypothesis. And usually the denser, the heavier soil, right? They keep the temperature really well.
Do you have questions from the floor? What is this? Yeah, you're gonna turn. You could just unmute and start talking, or pop it in the chat. Oh, Hans, please go ahead.
No.
Yeah, thanks. Very interesting. So a couple of questions. One, have you included any self-rooted vinifera in your comparison or only grafted plants?
There are self-root. Yeah, yes. I think these the data set do capture self-rooted vines. Yeah,
Did you
but
find
Yeah.
but
impact or same?
no, the sample size is too low here.
Okay.
Yeah, since most of the vines are grafted in the
Yeah.
valley. Yeah.
And the other question, I mean, that is really specific to my experience with older vines and the amount of latent buds. In Riesling, I did find that vines that are more than 40 years old, the number of latent buds is considerably lower than in younger vines that are actually from the same genetic pool in pretty much the same location. Have you found anything like this, or is this coincidence?
This is actually a really interesting observation. Like because there's a minimal study. Like they really want to dig where are those latent buds. We don't know where they are actually. Yeah. So I'm thinking, is that possible when the vines getting older, these latent buds were buried under the new growth? Yeah.
Yeah, I can't
I don't
explain.
know. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. It's a very cool observation. Yeah.
yeah, thanks.
So always, yeah, always. There's a new idea, new hypothesis that nobody really explored before. Thank you for the
Other
question.
other questions? So I talked to Elizabeth Volkovich about this in her climate modeling, because I saw, I don't know, probably about a year ago, I heard a Quirks and Quarks episode on CBC that talked about a volcano that in Tonga, like in the South
Mm-hmm.
Seas, back in 2022, that because it was an underwater eruption, sort of deposited a massive amount of seawater in the stratosphere. And so the commentator said, why didn't it cause weather changes the way previous volcanoes may have? And he said, well, first of all, it was water rather than ash, um, but also he said it has caused weather changes, and he was sort of attributing the disruption in the polar vortexes to this specific event rather than to sort of climate change kind of events. Um, and so so I passed it on to Lizzie, and she said, well, that's a hypothesis, that's a conjecture. We have no information really to prove one way or the other whether that's true. I cling to it because I don't really want to believe that this chaotic period of polar vortexes is here to stay, because then it makes it impossible to sort of make decisions about replanting and that sort of thing.
Right, right.
Clearly, like from the information that you're showing, the it looks like we should be leaning toward Pinot Noir and Chardonnay and those kind of varieties rather than varieties that are later ripening and require more heat. Whereas, if we have steady but ever increasing temperatures with climate change, we should be leaning towards, varieties that need a greater,
Heat units, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. That's
So,
really, yeah. I think the difficult right now is we don't really know the future, how the future looks like. Like what's the frequency? We got these cold event, right? Yeah. But I think I will take like a Marcus approach. Just believe it. Like the next 30 years, we wouldn't get another cold snap like this.
I also suggested to Marcus that maybe we've created some kind of British Columbia super vines, because the result, knowing the numbers, the amount of growth that we had in this past season has been very heartening, right? It's way better than what we expected last year at this time, right? And so yeah, I think it's like a supernatural BC, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think in the valley here we need to know what kind of option we have, right? Like we know we kind of at the age of this industry, the wine industry, and we probably couldn't use those most common varieties or approach other regions has. We probably need something else,
Yeah.
and we need to know what's the tool we have.
So I know there's a tiny bit of Marquette planted, right? Did you have results from those
I forgot to
vines?
mention about their behavior. So these cold events, remember, it was super warm, right? And suddenly dropped, and actually didn't give them sufficient time to acclimate to the cold. So actually, we start measuring Foch and the Marquette last year, and we kind of capture their performance during this event and before the events. And actually, they didn't went to the claimed cold hardness level. Yeah. So they still probably suffer from cold damage, but it's kind of in better than nothing level.
Well, and I keep asking if we have data around their heat resistance, like
Heat is that
Marquette's heat resistance, right?
I think of grapevines, they are pretty resilient to heat. Yeah. Even though today you might think the leaves are wilting, but once the weather cool down and they have a water to use, and they will recover really quick.
So it's a factor of water availability, and since we're mostly irrigated, it's not a concern for this region. Is that what you're thinking? The way it is
for at least for now, like it really depends on how much snowpack we have. Yeah.
Hans, is your hand still up, or do you have another question?
I think he has a question about Foch or a comment about Foch.
No, certainly. Yeah, no, interesting that you did raise this, because I was always kind of surprised how the LT50 bud measurements turn out for Foch. Because we do grow Foch in the coldest area of our vineyard, and it got to about -31. But it was still the only variety that actually had a crop, a little bit more than half a crop, and then no dead plants at all, no top loss. So I'm not quite sure how to explain that discrepancy between the actual survival and the measured LT50 values. I'm really kind of flummoxed by this.
So I went to your vineyard, right? And your vineyard actually has a relatively high elevation, I think. So in your vineyard, I think they probably receive a better acclimation like before the events. Yeah, like relatively speaking to the samples we took it from Peachland. I never visit that vineyard, but I suspect that specific vineyard probably is more exposed. So the temperature-wise actually not favor getting better cold hardness. Yeah.
Yeah, no, actually, that might actually be a good explanation, because it is in general, our averages are lower than most other
right
in the area. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Maybe we can take some sample from your vineyard and compare these two sites.
Yeah. No, anytime if you want some.
Cool.
Yeah, like, yeah, that could be a really interesting data set, right?
Mm,
Yeah,
yeah.
or especially year on year. Yeah. Thanks, Ben Min. Thanks again. I'm sure there's more we can delve into this. Hopefully we've had our catastrophic weather event for eternity and we won't be interested anymore and we won't invite you
Right.
back. But
For this topic, I can talk some other things.
okay, that sounds good. So thanks again. And
Thank
thanks
you.
to everyone who answered the survey. I think we did get some really good responses. So we've got good data. So March 3rd Thursday is the 20th. The topic is to be announced. You'll be hearing from Kate or Isabella about that, and we'll see you then. Okay, thanks. Bye.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for
Bye.
having me today.